All right, welcome everyone to our webinar today. This is the first of our Set Aside series, looking at practical strategies for strengthening Title I supports for our students experiencing homelessness. I am going to pull up our slides on my screen and kick us off for our time together today. We have a busy agenda, so thanks again for joining us. I am excited for all of our content that we've got for you today, as well as our panelists. We have 45 minutes together during our time today, and so we want to make sure to really make the most of this time. If you've got questions as we're going along, please put those in the Q&A box. We would love for you to introduce yourself in the chat. We would love to know who is joining us today, but please don't type your questions in the chat because sometimes those can get lost as the chat is going with questions and introductions and comments and thoughts. So again, type your questions into the Q&A box. We will be monitoring those and we'll have some time at the end of our session today to answer those questions. So thank you for your help with that. We are recording this session, so if you have to hop off early or if you want to go back and refer to something that was said, you will have access to this recording and the slides as well. I will ask my colleague Anna Sophia to drop the link to the slides in the chat for you so you can take a look at those as we go through. And you will also be issued a certificate for your attendance today. So hang tight with us as those will take a few minutes to get out after our time, but you will have access to that. And then want to quick put in a plug for our SHC community on Slack. If you are not already a part of that community, we want to invite you to join Slack. This is a really amazing place to meet together virtually with colleagues from across the country who are all supporting students and families experiencing homelessness. So again, you'll have access to that link in the slides that you will have. So I want to encourage you to take a look at joining that if you have not done that already. So as we begin, let me introduce myself to you. I'm Karen Rice. I'm the Senior Manager of Education Initiatives at SchoolHouse Connection. And if you are not familiar with us at SchoolHouse Connection, we are a national nonprofit advocacy organization. And our mission is to overcome homelessness through early care and education, from prenatal to post-secondary and everything in between. And so we do that in a number of different ways through strategic advocacy, both at the state and federal level, through our practical assistance and professional development, and our scholarship program. So I want to encourage you to connect with us on our website and through our newsletter. If you are not already connected with us, we share resources and strategies and hope that that will be helpful as you do your work with supporting your students and families that you work with. So again, thank you so much for joining us today. My colleague, Anna Sophia, our K-12 Senior Manager, is on the call with us as well. So we are excited to share this time together with you and want to jump in because we've got a really full agenda. We've got a lot to cover and a lot that we want to share with you today during our time. We are going to start out by just going through a quick overview of the Title I Part A Homeless Set Aside. If you've joined us for other Title I webinars, you've heard a lot of the same information. We want to just keep talking about it and keep building awareness around what the set aside is. We're going to talk also today very briefly about the idea of using an elevator pitch when it comes to thinking about funding and having those conversations around funding. So we will introduce you to that as well. And then the highlight of our time together today is a discussion that we are going to have with Courtney Jones from the Clover School District. Courtney is going to talk through the Title I Homeless Set Aside that he uses in the LEA where he works. So looking forward to that in our conversation today. And then again, we will have time for questions at the end. So please put those in the Q&A box as they come up for you. All right, let's jump in and talk through just a brief overview of our Title I Part A Homeless Set Aside. We don't have a lot of time to cover this, so hang with me as we go through this kind of fast and furious today. But want to just start out by giving you kind of a big picture. So our Title I Part A funds, we know that our students experiencing homelessness are eligible for Title I Part A services regardless of what school they are attending in the LEA. And any LEA that receives Title I Part A funds must set aside funds to specifically support our students experiencing homelessness. And so we're going to talk a little bit about what that looks like. We're going to talk a little bit about allowable uses, and then we're going to hear what that looks like practically. So let's start out by just covering a couple of questions that we get. These are very common questions that we hear from LEAs across the country. So first and foremost, are LEAs required to set aside funds? The answer to that is yes. every LEA that receives Title I Part A funds is required to set aside a portion of those funds specifically to support students experiencing homelessness. And as I said, our students experiencing homelessness are categorically eligible for receiving supports and services under Title I Part A, regardless of what school they attend. And so that's a question that we hear often of if they're in a school that does not receive services and funding under Title I, if it's a non-Title I school, are they still eligible for Title I services? And the answer to that is yes. Our Title I funds are set aside is so important because so many of the LEAs that don't receive EHCY or McKinney-Vento subgrant funds really rely on these Title I Part A set-aside funds to support students experiencing homelessness. In fact, you can see on this slide that 76% of LEAs don't get those subgrant funds. And so Title I Part A set-aside funds are really that most impactful way and that best funding source to meet the unique needs of our students experiencing homelessness. So what does that look like? How do our funds support students experiencing homelessness? First of all, there are a couple of guiding principles when we think about how we use our funds and what that looks like. And so we know, of course, that the Department of Education gives us this guidance that said these services and funds must be used in a way that's reasonable and necessary so that our students experiencing homelessness can take advantage of educational opportunities. And these funds are used as a last resort when other funding sources are not available. So we always want to look at what our other options are for funding and what other funding sources exist within our LEAs to support our students experiencing homelessness. There are a number of allowable uses. We do not have time to talk about all of the allowable uses today, but we know that very commonly LEAs are using their funds to defray the cost of transportation to and from the school of origin, defraying the cost of the salary of the liaison in the LEA. And then there's this whole list of allowable uses that we have shared for you on this slide. This is a very comprehensive list. If you have specific allowable uses, I would encourage you to think about contacting your state coordinator. I know that in many states, there are some really specific criteria for some of the allowable uses. And so if you've got specific questions, that's a great place to start. But I do want to say, if you take a look at this list, we can get really creative within these allowable uses. They are open, and so we can think about all of the different ways and all of the different needs and really think creatively and outside the box on how we can meet needs of our students and experiencing homelessness with these funds. So I will share this list with you today, and then we will also hear from Courtney on the uses of funds in the LEA where he works. And as a teaser for you, we've got a whole series of these webinars coming up over the next month and a half or so, where you will hear from other liaisons as well on how they're using funds. So want to encourage you to join those as well so you can hear really what that looks like practically in other LEAs. So before we continue, I want to just make sure that you are aware that SchoolHouse Connection has put out a guide for liaisons, practitioners, advocates, all of those of us who are serving our students and families experiencing homelessness who need to have information about our Title I Part A homeless set aside. So this guide is really useful. It's very practical, and it answers some really fundamental questions, such as how much funding do we have to set aside within our Title I Part A set aside? The answer to that question is there's nothing in the law that says it has to be one way or the other. What's really unique about this is it gives us an opportunity to look at the specific needs of our students and families experiencing homelessness. We can look at what's reasonable and necessary. We can look at what those needs are, and then really think about the best way to use these funds to meet those needs. So there are some really great examples in this guide that's linked on these slides. And so I would really want to encourage you to take a look at those as well. One other question that we address in this guide is, can the amount of the set aside be changed during the school year? What happens if we determine an amount and things change? We identify more students, we have different needs. The answer is that amount can be changed. And so we always want to make sure that we are working with those in our LEA. It might be our business office or our federal programs office or our fiscal services to make those changes, but they can absolutely be adjusted as we have changing needs and different changing dynamics within our programs. So keep that in mind as you're thinking about your funds and you're thinking about how those are used. and you're thinking about that needs assessment. If you're using some kind of needs assessment to determine what amount that set aside should be, it's a great idea to go back periodically during the course of the academic year to look at that needs assessment of how things might have changed or what else has come up, or what other trends you're seeing. So just want to encourage you to be thinking about that as well. As I mentioned in this guide, there are a number of spotlights that talk about local LEAs and how they're using funds and what that practically looks like. So want to encourage you to check that out. And there's also a section on state guidance. So if you have questions specific to your state, that's a great place to look, a great place to find more information about that. So that is our guide, our Title I Part A Homeless Set Aside guide. So we have just a few more minutes before we're going to jump into our conversation here. But before we do that, I just want to introduce you to this idea of using an elevator pitch in our funding conversations. So for many of us, and I can tell you that when I was a liaison, I was not involved in conversations around the Title I Part A set aside. And I wish that I would have been. Knowing now if I would have known that then, I would have absolutely tried to get myself a seat at that table to be able to advocate for the students and the families that I was working with. And so if you're not sure where to start, I want to say that is the best place to start. Find out who in your business office or who in your federal programs office are those folks that are making that decision about funding, and meet with them and share with them and advocate with them. And one of the very best ways to do that is to think about using an elevator pitch. Now, if you're not familiar with the term elevator pitch, an elevator pitch is basically just a short, really concise way to communicate a message. And so you might have seen on our SchoolHouse Connection webpage that we have an elevator pitch that really talks about building awareness and identification for our students experiencing homelessness. As we've been talking about Title I, it occurred to our team that we need to think about this from a funding perspective as well. And how can we offer an elevator pitch as a tool that will really be helpful in starting those conversations for those liaisons that have not historically had a seat at the table to talk about funding? What can we provide as a tool to kind of get those conversations started? And so we want to offer this to you today as a tool that you can use as you're thinking about how to have conversations around your Title I Part A set aside. So an elevator pitch is a compelling 30 to 90 second, just short and concise speech that really is essential to help provide information as well as to talk about specific actions and asks. We know that if your elevator pitch is effective, you might increase your identification in your LEA. You might build awareness around McKinney-Vento. You might access more resources or have additional supports or partnerships within your LEA. It's also really important to remember that liaisons cannot do their jobs alone. We rely on partners both within our own LEA and also within the community and those external partners. And these elevator pitches are a really important way to make those connections and to help get those partnerships built for the benefit of our programs. So when we think about the idea of an elevator pitch for funding, I want to just say that this is a very quick example for you. Your elevator pitch might look very, very different than this. When we were coming up with some sample language for you, we know that this implies a lot of different things. It implies that your business office, your federal programs office, your fiscal services offices, that they maybe know about McKinney-Vento already. They maybe understand McKinney-Vento. And so this implies also that they are ready to have conversations about funds, that you're able to really advocate and to talk about what it is that you need and why it is that you need that for your students. So take this as an example and really think about if there's ways that you can tailor this for your own purposes. So think about what you share at the beginning of your pitch, what really will get someone's attention. Maybe that's sharing the number of students that you have identified, an increase in the trend, or looking at the numbers of students who are chronically absent or who are not graduating on time or who are not reading at grade level. And then looking at what can we do about that. We need to also make sure we're making it important to that audience and then also providing those clear action steps. I had the privilege of talking with a liaison a number of years ago who said, she had an elevator pitch that she really had to kind of fine tune over the years to speak the language of her business office and to speak the language of those that she was talking to about funding. And for her, that meant coming up with more data. It meant coming up with numbers and really concrete action steps. And so we hope that this will give you kind of that guide. So this is just a very brief, again, very quick kind of idea for you to get the ideas rolling in your mind. So your sample pitch to someone in your finance office might be, last year we had 200 students experiencing homelessness, which was a 15% increase from the previous year. Our data from our student information system shows 40% of these students are chronically absent, which tells us they're facing barriers to get to school. We're required by federal law, McKinney-Vento law, to identify these students and remove those barriers. But right now, our data shows that we don't have a way to do that effectively with our staff capacity that we have. So to address this, we need to increase our Title I Part A homeless set aside, and we'd like to fund a 50% social worker who can focus specifically on chronic absenteeism for our students experiencing homelessness. And then that very concrete ask is, I'll put together a proposal talking more about this, and let's meet again next week to keep talking. Again, this implies that you're at that point in your relationship with your business office that you can ask those specific things. Maybe you need to start at the beginning and share what McKinney-Vento is. But again, take this and use it as a template and as a tool and a resource that you can use when you're thinking about those conversations. All right, that was a lot of information very quickly. Thanks for hanging in while we did a very quick overview of our Title I Part A homeless set-aside funds. And I am very excited now that we are going to hear what this practically looks like in an LEA. So we are joined today by Courtney Jones, who is the attendance officer and homeless liaison in the Clover School District in South Carolina. So Courtney, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that we can see you. And we are going to start out, if you wouldn't mind starting by just introducing yourself. Tell us who you are and what your role is a little bit more specifically.
All right. Good afternoon, depending on what part of the country you are in. Again, my name is Courtney Jones, and I am the McKinney-Vento liaison for the Clover School District in Clover, South Carolina. So Clover is a small town just southwest of of Charlotte, North Carolina. So we have a metropolitan city that's really close. We have a combination within our district, suburban, and as you go west, it becomes more rural. Aside from the McKinney-Vento liaison hat, I am also the foster point of contact, a dropout coordinator for our school district, as well as I supervise the school social workers. So prior to me taking this role, I was a school social worker for 20 years. So this is my third full year in this role. So learning a lot. And so maybe a stretch to say I'm an expert, but I hang around people who are experts. I'll say that.
Thanks, Courtney. We're going to jump right in. And I'm wondering if you will start out by telling us, how much does your LEA set aside in your homeless set aside? And then what does that process look like to make that determination?
That's a very good question. So particularly how that determination is made, I'll start there first. So like what was shared with you earlier, I guess different people are at different points in their involvement in finding out how that money is allotted. I am not, unfortunately, a part of that conversation. However, I am doing as much as possible to share data with them to encourage that data, to encourage my participation in that. Right now, for our site set aside, I have about $1,500 that we have there. And then a little later, I'll tell you how I've been using that money and how I've kind of partnered with other groups and organizations to extend that money beyond what's been allocated for me.
Thanks, Courtney. Will you talk a little bit about how you use data? What data do you use? What's important data to be sharing within the broader LEA?
Yeah, definitely. So part of the data was from my own, I just had to wrap around just so much information that's going on and so many what appear to be loose ends when it comes to identifying and, of course, keeping track of students who are identified under McKinney-Vento. So obviously, I'm tracking the grade levels in schools. But what I ended up doing is almost like developing like a heat map, so to speak. So like finding out where our concentrated areas were, and so I've done that, and there are a couple of spots that we've noticed that are more identified students coming from a particular area. So that was one thing I've used that data for, but also keeping track of those students, particularly at the high school level, who are chronically absent, particularly those who are considered unaccompanied, and finding ways that we can try to intervene pretty quickly. So we're trying to have like early identifiers with them, just because when you think of like seat time associated with them, it can be very challenging for them to get the hours needed for the meeting the graduation requirements. So that's a little bit of how I use some of the data.
Thanks, Courtney. Can you talk to us about what your funds are used for?
Yeah, absolutely. So I can tell you what I use the Title One money for. We've used it for glasses. That's been a major thing. We have a partnership with one of our local optometrists, transportation. Last year, we had several students who we were able to connect them with tutoring services. So we're able to do that as well. Um, One thing that's been a little bit challenging, we've tried to figure out how to do this because we don't really have many options. Like I shared, we're kind of about 9,000 students is where we are. So we do have some students who have some after school challenges. And so we've been trying to partner with some, either with some childcare agencies, or is the YMCA has a program, but to ensure that they're providing educational services to make it appropriate for our Title One usage. And so it's been challenging, but the good thing is that we've been able to start some conversations with some of those providers. And though it may not be something that we're able to do right now, I think hopefully we can get that where it's a service that we can have provided a little later. Of course, right now, earlier this week, we ordered some dance shoes for a student, extracurricular activities in which they're involved in, and they needed dance shoes to participate on the Clover High School dance team. So things like that. So there's a number of things I'm pretty sure that I'm overlooking, but those are some of the uses right now.
Thanks for that, Courtney. Can you talk about the impacts of using the funds and really the results of what you've been able to do with your set aside funds?
Yeah, definitely. The most obvious thing is kind of removing some of the barriers that the students face. And just using the young student from earlier this week, we're able to get those shoes and get it to her pretty quickly. So a lot of that is like the peace of mind for this particular student, feeling like she's one of the only students who may not have the supplies that are needed for this particular um, uh, after school program. Um, some of the other impacts kind of go beyond that. I think has been our school social workers, and even me, being able to help address some of the needs, and then we're able to foster better communication, relationships with parents, unaccompanied students. So those impacts like that leads to other opportunities to either connect, refer. There's a trusting relationship that is developed because you're working intimately with the students or the families. So we're seeing uh, better relationships because, as you all know, when it comes to some of our families, they can be pretty transient, and then when things happen, because of we fostered that communication pattern from just being able to assist, they were able to notify us when there was going to be a certain change. So whether that was changing within the school district or moving to one of our neighboring school districts, we were able to connect them and refer them to the next liaison to get them connected to a new school setting if needed.
Thanks, Courtney. Can you talk about what other funding sources you're braiding and blending in order to implement your McKinney-Vento program?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is what I was alluded to with the first question. So, um, historically, we've utilized several groups. One is called the Mayday Project. And I don't want to talk too long. I know we're limited time. So the Mayday Project kind of came about some years ago. I did like a photo project in the community, just kind of documenting what homelessness looks like. Because I think for the most part, particularly here and then toward the eastern side, in the suburban side of our school district, or people think about Clover School District, they think about the suburban side and not necessarily people who have needs. So with the permission of some of the families, and I was able to kind of have this documentation that I was able to provide, and I kind of presented it to this community forum. And out of that birthed this group called the Mayday Project. And so what they do for us is that they have provided scholarship money for students. They have like every quarter they donate Walmart gift cards, so we don't have to, use our money and then get reimbursed, so we can use Walmart cards. And then most recently, we had another organization called the Burrow Foundation. They give us quarterly donations as well to the tune of $2,500 a quarter. So it's been great to have other avenues. And so one of the things that we did during that time, and this is kind of talking about the heat map. So we decided to do a community event in that particular community that we had. It was almost like a parent night is pretty much what we decided to do. And as we were planning, and I was talking to our, of course, our finance office, they weren't so sure about how Title I blends. So we used some of the monies that came from the other organization. We kind of pitched the idea to them, told them what we were thinking, because they are targeting McKinney-Vento identified families as well. And so we were able to do a huge parent engagement in that particular community. We had local help organizations come in. The York County Bookmobile showed up. We had food, of course, bought books, games that were given to the kids that were, I guess, you don't really think of like Uno being a math game, but it is, things like that. But we're able to do all these things for the community in a high concentrated area with a number of McKinney-Vento identified students.
Thanks for that, Courtney. Before we go on to our next question, I want to just ask a question in the chat that came in because it's an easy question. So this is just clarifying if you said your Title I funds totaled about $1,500 per year, and then how many McKinney-Vento students do you identify?
Yes, that is accurate. So what I was informed of is that 20% of the funds are set aside for homeless. So I asked, depending on what our needs are, could that be increased? I was informed, yes, it is. So the balance and challenge of me is like, well, which part of money do you spend? Because if you don't show that you're utilizing the funds with some of the community groups, they may no longer donate. And then you also want to spend down some of your Title I funds. So you want to respond to the kids' needs, but at the same time, you want to show different groups like, hey, we are utilizing these funds. Please send us more. Was there a second part of that question that she asked?
The second part was just how many students do you identify every year?
All right. So right now we have 130 identified students. And that has been increasing. So the year prior to me taking over the role, we had like 67, 70, somewhere in there. So we're doing a better job of identifying, and I'm pretty sure there are more out there. I found out about a family today that without heating. So most likely, once we make communication with them, make contact with them, they're likely going to be identified for a substandard home. So hopefully I answered your question there.
Thanks, Courtney. We'll go on to our next question. So curious what training you've done with your business office or your federal programs office. I
Mhm.
know you and I over the years have talked about this idea of an elevator pitch.
Yeah.
And so, as we're introducing this idea to our participants today on the webinar, would love to know what your experience has been with using an elevator pitch and kind of what training and what advocacy do you do?
All right, absolutely. So the training aspect of it is kind of a twofold training because we have a training kind of built into our beginning of the year sessions that it could be like FERPA training and all those kind of things. But we have a designated McKinney Vento training that goes out to everyone. However, I go over to the finance department and I talk about just what McKinney Vento is. So I have direct conversations with them about that. I don't know if it's more so training, but I try to inform them of everything that I'm doing. So, and then I'll kind of tie this back into the elevator pitch because I'm constantly elevator pitching. So even if it's a situation where I know I'm not going to utilize the funds there, I let them know what I'm thinking. It just keeps things on the front end. And so what I end up doing, so for instance, fortunately we had this is the last year we have one high school town, and so we had our band that went to the Rose Bowl. We had a McKinney Vento identified student who did not have the funds. However, through our work with Mayday, a couple other partnerships, we were able to get this done. So through the entire process, I'm letting the finance team know. I know they can't provide any financial resources, but I'm letting them know what's going on. And then so once we were able to secure all the funds, it was like this huge celebration. At least in my car, it was. But the band director gave me this Rose Bowl pen. He gave me like three of them, so I gave it to the finance team and to let them know. So I'm constantly letting them know what's going on, whether they had direct involvement or not, just because I want them to know the impact that they have on the students that they're serving. So, so it's constantly elevator pitching. And I think Karen, you and I talked about this before. It's really kind of learning not just the group that you're with, but the individuals within the group. Because some people are just more attuned to like emotional stories. Some people like raw numbers. So, like with our chief financial person, I talk to him about raw numbers. I let him know, hey, hey, Mr. Love, hey, just to let you know, this is how many students we have this year so far. Just wanted to keep you updated. I know it's been pretty tight from a budgetary standpoint, but eventually I would like to ask for another school social worker. And so I'm throwing out those kind of things. And it's constant. He probably, when he sees me, he knows I'm probably going to ask for some money or something like that. But then, George, who works in procurement, is emotional. So I told him, specifically, within I don't break confidence on anything, but I try to give him emotional things and let him know what those things are. So it's a weaving of those, but I don't see it as a one shot. It's a constant. Even if I'm out in the community, if I see somebody with a shirt on, let's say First Baptist Church, that's everybody has a First Baptist Church. So I'll say, hey, your group supported, this particular student who went on to this particular place. So I try to make it personal during that time as well.
I think that's a really great point. And it's not just about the funds and asking for funds, but it's really building that awareness ends up resulting in maybe more resources and more partnerships.
Yeah.
And appreciate what you said, Courtney, about kind of learning to speak that language. I talk about that all the time of, it's whether it's numbers and graphs and charts or it's that kind of emotional like more social work perspective and that kind of trying to tug at those heartstrings a little to help communicate that message. It's knowing your audience and using that elevator pitch in a way that communicates the message that can be understood by that person. So thank you so much, Courtney. I want to just say that we don't have any questions right now in the Q&A box. So hopefully you're not sweating too much with that, Courtney. But we did have one question that came in earlier I will just say the question was around transportation and whether or not transportation is allowable with Title I set aside funds. And that answer is yes. So if you have transportation needs, and I want to say that we know transportation is a challenge everywhere. And so Title I set aside funds can be used to support that need. It can also support that need in really unique ways. We've talked with LEAs who have drivers that they fund, who have vehicles that they've been able to purchase, that have different partnerships with different public transportation. So get creative when it comes to that transportation piece.
Yeah, and I'll add for us, we have a local gas station here, and it's in town, so it's advantageous for some families, for not all. But we have a purchase order open with them, so we're able to write out this gas gift like certificates. For instance, it might say, I'll put the name Courtney Jones, do not exceed $60. So they can turn it into the gas station. They can fill up. Gas station will bill us later. So we've used the funds for that as well.
Thanks for that, Courtney. We had another comment come in just talking about the idea of having an elevator pitch is really important for creating partnerships and for resources. And the idea that it would be helpful for states to provide clear guidance. And I want to take that and just say if you are looking for more specifics, I have two things that I think will be helpful. That guide that I mentioned earlier at the beginning, I know we went through a lot of information very quickly, but that guide that SchoolHouse Connection put out includes information on some state guidance. So that's a great place to start to look for your state to see what kind of guidance and information is there and is helpful. You can also reach out directly to your McKinney-Vento state coordinator. Now, not every McKinney-Vento state coordinator works with Title I, but very likely they know who those folks are and they can help get you connected to the right person and start to kind of build some of those partnerships. So if you've got questions that maybe you're not sure of and that you need more information to support your questions to your business office or your fiscal services or your federal programs, that can be a great state level resource as well. So I just wanted to make sure to note that. We did have a couple questions, additional questions on transportation. I will say I want to encourage you to go to that guide that we have. We talk a lot about transportation in that as well. But funds can be used to defray the excess cost of transportation. And so what that means is costs that are above and beyond what those typical transportation costs are. What I mean by that specifically is if you have a regular bus route and your student is riding a regular bus route that is in your LEA, that's not excess cost of transportation. But if you are sending a cab or if you are having to do some kind of additional transportation for school of origin, then that is something that you could use funds for. So again, want to refer you back to that guide for more information. If you've got specific allowable use questions, I know there are a couple of those that are coming in. I will say we don't have time to get into all of the specific allowable uses today. So please check in with us. We would love to connect with you offline to talk more about that. We'd love to help connect you with the right folks at your state education agency who can answer specific questions as well. As I said before, there are sometimes really specific things that state agencies need when they're looking at that use of funds. And so it's a great idea to build some of those partnerships and know who those folks are that you can ask those specific questions to if you're unsure. I will say today that I spoke with a liaison this morning and she was sharing with me some of the advocacy that she has to do for the things that she wants to use her Title I set aside funds for. And she shared with me that she often goes to her McKinney-Vento state coordinator who can help connect her with her Title I person at the state agency, who then can provide her some of that information to funnel back to her business office. So sometimes it takes a little bit of looking and connecting with the right folks, but then she's able to take that information and take it back to her business office to say, yes, we can absolutely do this. This is an allowable use. Here's what we need to provide, or here's what the guidance is around this. So connecting with folks at your state education agency is a great idea if you are not already connected with those folks. We do have a directory on our website, and I know Anna Sophia put that link in the chat for your state coordinator if you are not connected with that person already. All right, Courtney, anything else you want to add? And if not, we don't have any additional questions, so I will close us out unless you've got some final thoughts for us.
No, just thank you for the opportunity. Hopefully for just the audience, hopefully I answered some things. I have a lot of people who I reach out to, so I don't claim to be expert in learning. Um, Something new every day in this world. So, but thank you all for your support at Schoolhouse.
Thank you so much, Courtney. We really appreciate your being here and your joining us and answering all these questions and sharing your insight and your knowledge with us. So I want to, again, sorry, I think I'm sharing the wrong screen here. There we go. Want to just put in a plug for the rest of our series coming up. We are doing these webinars every 2 weeks until March. And so we have liaisons from across the country that are coming in to share about the work that they're doing and how they're using their funds. So just want to encourage you, if you are not already registered, please join us for these. We will also post all of these webinars on our website. So if you're unable to join, you can register to get the recording, or you can always refer back to our website as well. But we're going to have some great conversations, starting out with Courtney today and going with some liaisons again coming up. And then finally, if you are not connected with us, we are on all social media. So we would love to connect with you. We would love to connect with you in our SHC community on Slack that I mentioned. That can be a really great place to say, hey, what does your elevator pitch look like? What information are you using, or what are you sharing? How are you using your funds? And this is a place to connect with others who are on the ground and working with students every day. So please feel free to join us on that. We would love to have you a part of that. And then please feel free to reach out to us. This is Courtney's information. I know Courtney is really wonderful at sharing his knowledge with everyone. So Courtney, I hope you don't mind that I'm sending out your email address here. And I would love to connect with you as well. Our team at Schoolhouse, Anna Sophia and myself and our K-12 team, we are more than happy to talk with you and provide information and resources and anything that you need for supporting the students and families that you work with. So thank you all so much for joining us. We are so grateful to have had you here with us today. Grateful for your time. One more time, Courtney, thank you so much for being here. And we look forward to seeing you again in a few weeks to continue our conversation. Have a great day, everyone. Thanks for joining us.